Welcome to Guitar Town. So we've worked our way up from, down from size 1 Martins down to size 5, which is the smallest I had that I own, and now we're working our way up. Through the aughts, we went single aught, double aught, and then we get to triple aught size Martins. Now, these guitars were the biggest guitar that Martin made for a long time. The original triple O size guitar, they started making them pretty early, but they didn't make a lot of them until really the 30s. But they one of the rarest, I think, and it's one of my real holy grails is a triple O 21, which would be a slot head configuration like this, they call it. The 12 frets to the body, the old classical style slotted headstock, and with the tuning keys going backwards instead of sticking straight out from a solid headstock like the modern guitars. They were all this configuration for quite a while. Then suddenly it sort of evolved from a guitar that was made for known as the OM or orchestra model, that was made for a guy that was essentially a plectrum banjo player named Perry Bechtel. And he wanted he played guitar as well, and he was playing with orchestras, and he wanted something bigger and louder, but he wanted 14 frets and the longer neck, and so it was built as a long scale guitar. I think basically the same scale as the large Dreadnought Martins originally, and those are known as OMs. They were just made for a few years, and they kept that body style, which was the 14 fret style, which is shaped a little bit differently. Basically, they just took this sort of round shoulder and, cut it off so that the body met at the 14th fret. We'll get back to this guitar in a minute. This guitar is not as old as it looks. It's really pretty, but we'll talk about it in a second. The very first pre-war Martin I ever bought is this guitar here. I bought it from Matt Umanoff. I bought it in his shop. I walked in, and this guitar belonged to Mark Sebastian, who is John's brother. And he'd had it for a long time, decided he was going to let it go. And I just happened to walk in, and I said, well, so if that's for sale, how much is that going to be? And I think Matt, I think if I remember his exact words, what? Something like this? And I heard him say that about a lot of instruments after that. But this is a 1936 triple O 18. It's mahogany backs and sides, very plain. Mahogany sounds quite a bit different than rosewood. We've had a lot of rosewood guitars. They didn't start making, the lower, actually, style 18 guitars were originally rosewood. I think style 17 may have always been mahogany. I'm not sure about that. But the mahogany guitars, the mahogany was cheaper. It has kind of a different sound. It's a lot, it's a little more mid-range, I think, a little less low end. A lot of people prefer it. I know people that would rather have a D18 than a D28. I had a killer 1939 D18, was the first pre-war Dreadnought guitar I had. Chris Stapleton has that guitar now. That's a long story. But, this is a really great guitar. It's a 36. It's 14 frets to the body. This is kind of just like a triple O 18 that you'd buy a day. There's some differences. It's wider at the nut than the modern ones are. This is a really great guitar. One of the very best guitars that I own is because like I've said earlier, I collect style 21 guitars. I have a triple O 21 that I bought at Carter Vintage here in Nashville, and it's a little deeper sounding. And this guitar was built the first half, I think, of 1938, and because in 1938, later in the year, they changed the bracing pattern, Martins. They moved it. Let's see. I always get this backwards. They moved the bracing back away from the sound hole. So now when you buy a guitar with this configuration of bracing on the inside, they decided that was a bad idea. So now they they make a big deal of forward shifted bracing. Actually, the bracing was shifted backwards, and the forward shifted that they talk about is the original bracing pattern. This guitar is probably technically might even be the best Martin guitar I own. It's one of my favorites. I use it quite a bit. I've used it some in the studio. During this quarantine thing, I've used it for several of the videos that I've made just because I hadn't played it in a long time. So it was the first guitar I got out. I'm going to go back to this guitar. This guitar was made in 1974, I think. I think that's correct, 73 or 74. And it's the old style slot head, triple O size guitar. These are my favorite Martin guitars, actually, when it gets right down to it. Slide head triple O's are kind of hard to beat. And this one's pretty special. I bought it from Matt as well. It was in a case in his shop. It was there on consignment. This guitar belonged to Artie Traum, and when I bought it, was when Artie was still alive. So he knew that I had it. I never actually met Artie. He became ill, shortly after I moved to New York, and he passed away. I bought a house in Woodstock a few years later and got to know Happy Traum, his brother, pretty well, and we had one of the first conversations we had was about the fact that I own this guitar. This guitar, I bought it just before I started the Washington Square Serenade record. This is a 45 style, which is pretty much the fanciest Martin guitars. It's rosewood. It is bound in the front and the back, and there's abalone inlay along both the inside of the white stripes on the binding and inside of the purfling on the trim around the sound hole, and big pieces of abalone position markers. And then of course the first time I ever saw this was on a guitar. I think it's actually a double O or maybe a single O 45 that Stephen Stills is playing on the cover on his records, and that was the first time that I saw this on the fancier Martin guitars, the CF Martin in abalone on the headstock, the CF on the other side, and I thought that was the coolest thing in the world, and I wanted one so bad. But this is Matt Umanoff ordered. They had not made triple O. They hadn't made 45 style guitars, period, in a long time, and he bugged them and bugged them and bugged them to make them. Finally, they agreed to make them, but he had to order a certain number, and he said, "Okay, I'll do that, but I want them all to." He wanted 2. I think he ordered 6, and I think there were that 2 of them were. 3 were slot heads like this. 3 were 14 frets. And I think 2 out of the 6 were sunburst like this, and he one of the 14 frets and one of the 12 frets. And this one Artie Traum bought and took home and owned for years. He bought it new in the mid '70s, and I bought it in 2005, and I've owned it ever since. And I used it on the Washington Square record, including the song that opens that record. Sunset, my mirror, paddle along the floor. I'm in New York City and won't be back no more. Won't be back no more, boys won't see me around. Goodbye, Guitar Town. Go south on the highway, horses in the wind, telling me we may never pass this way again. Horses on the highway, angels This ain't never been my home. A stranger in my mirror, lines around my eyes, string around my finger, but don't remember why. Don't remember why, boys, don't remember how. Goodbye, Guitar Town. Woo. Well, I'm bound to roam. This ain't never been my home. Blue dog on my floorboard, red by my side, across the mighty Hudson River to the New York City side. Red by my side, boys, sweetest thing I found. Goodbye, Guitar Town. 1974 and 1938 and 1936, Triple O Martins, and boy, this guitar is pretty.